bringing a message today that I've entitled, It Was for Freedom. It was for freedom. And I want to underline today, and I want you to leave with this morning, that Jesus Christ does not just want us to experience freedom in a service while we're together like this, but he wants us to live in freedom regardless of the circumstances that we face. It was for freedom. Last week we talked about the fact that people follow Jesus because of who he is. We talked about Zacchaeus when he heard that Jesus was coming through Jericho, that he had heard about this man but had never yet met him, and so made the decision that he wanted to meet with this Jesus. And because he was small of stature, the crowds that had gathered, he wasn't able to see Jesus for himself, and so he climbed up into a sycamore tree to give him a good vantage point, and from there he was able to see Jesus. And not only did he see him, but Jesus stopped and called him down from the tree. And Zacchaeus left that tree, came down and met with Jesus, and actually brought Jesus back to his home. And from that moment, Zacchaeus followed Jesus. But I want you to note that Zacchaeus never went back up that tree. He never went back up the tree. He came down to follow Jesus. And that's what he did. He followed Jesus. And friends, I want to say this morning that whenever Jesus sets you free, he sets you free to walk in that freedom. He sets you free so you can follow him, but in following him, that you're walking in that freedom. Zacchaeus never went back up in that tree. He didn't need to. And so he calls you to walk in freedom, and he releases you to walk in freedom and to not go back to wherever you came from, but to continue to walk forward and walk and live in freedom. There are many in this wee country of ours, and we still call it our wee country, and they know what it's like to be imprisoned. Some of you in this place, you know what that experience is like. But there are many people who know not only what it's like to be imprisoned, but they also know what it's like to be released and then to walk in freedom. Not many, or certainly there's a lot of people who don't know anything about that kind of experience other than what others have shared, and we'll hear that from Packy Hamilton tonight also. But there's some, and you understand what it's like. I have to say I don't fully understand, and I use the word fully. I don't fully understand what that's like. Although I will share this little secret that a few of you know. I'm not going into too many details. But just a few days before we were married, so we're talking 50 years ago, just a few days before we were married, I was arrested. Jack McKee was arrested. And I have to say, not for the first time. There were a few occasions. But one occasion, whenever I was arrested, taken in the back of a Land Rover, and all sorts of stuff went on. And I was taken to Glenravel Police Station. None of you ever been there? Any of you guys remember Glenravel Police Station? It's knocked down there. There are apartments there. And it's just was just off Clifton Street. But I remember being taken into a cell in the police station. And I was held there for 24 hours and questioned about certain things. And I was facing 8 to 10 years in prison at that time. And the thoughts in my mind were that obviously we're going to have to put a wedding back for 10 years. So if that had happened, we'd be celebrating 40 years this week and not 50 years. But I was literally facing my brother, who lived in Scotland at the time. He was best man, so he came back a few days early, get ready for the wedding, and because they had me in, they went out and they picked him up and brought him and threw him in the cell with me. And he sat and he says, "See, you should be getting me into. I'm going to be your best man." And there I was, certainly for minimum of, or at least 24 hours. But I remember the sense of relief. I'll never forget that sense of relief whenever I was taken out of the prison cell in the police station. And I was shown the door, and I was told I could go. And I walked out into Clifton Street, and I walked across the Carlisle Circus and then into Denmark Street and back home. And that was a great sense of relief, obviously at that moment in time. But to walk out of a prison cell after several years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, must be the greatest feeling ever for some people. Just to know that what you went through, you've gone through it, and the day has come when the prison door is open and you're able to walk free. Must be the greatest freedom ever after several years. The Apostle Paul wrote about freedom, but he wrote about freedom because he understood what freedom meant. The Apostle Paul had been put in prison. He knew what it was to arrest people, have them beaten, and have them thrown into prison. But now he experienced prison for himself. So he knew what it was to be imprisoned. He knew what it was to be beaten. And he also knew what it was to face the possibility of death. In fact, came the day when he was imprisoned and then taken out and put to death. He understood what that experience was. But he also knew what it was to be set free and to walk away from the prison cell that he had been held in. And so when he wrote about freedom, he knew what he was writing about. He knew that he was writing out of his own personal experience. So he knew what freedom meant. And he also knew how freedom should be lived. See, it's one thing to know what freedom means. It's another thing to know and to understand how freedom should be lived and to live in that freedom. And Paul understood that. And so with that in mind, this is what Paul said about freedom in Galatians 5 and verse 1. We'll just show the first slide of the first part of the verse. Galatians 5 verse 1, he says, "It was for freedom that Christ has set us free." It was for freedom that Christ has set us free. I want you to pause with that for a few moments. Because this is something that we should be excited about as Christians. A couple of weeks ago we did sing about freedom. Freedom reigns in this place. And there was an excitement in this place. And we should be excited every time we talk about freedom or we sing about freedom as Christians. This should excite us. See, Jesus came to set us free. And he came to set us free from the control of sin so that it would no longer have dominion over us. He came to set us free from addictions. He came to set us free from life-controlling issues, from life-controlling problems. And while these are things that we should be excited about, I want to say this morning that the freedom that Jesus brings us into is much, much more than just these things. It's much more than just being released from a prison cell. It's much more than just being set free from drug addiction, alcoholism, and from life-controlling issues. It's much, much more than that. These are part of it. But the freedom that he calls us to live and to walk in is much more than just being set free from something. So we get excited about these things, and rightly so. But it's much more than those things that we can put our finger on and say, well, that's what he freed me from, and so on. And so we're not just talking about Jesus having set us free. And we thank God that he's done it. We thank God that people can testify about the things that God has set them free from. But he sets us free so that we can live in freedom. Not just talking about what he's freed us from, but so that we could live in freedom. That's why Paul said here in Galatians 5 verse 1, it is for freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. see, he didn't just set us free so we could say, well, we no longer take drugs, and hopefully and trust and praying that those who have been in that lifestyle, that you know that he set you free from those things. But he didn't just set us free so we can stand up and testify, well, I used to take drugs and thank God I don't take drugs anymore. It's part of it. And he didn't just set us free so that we can say, well, we're not getting blocked at the weekends anymore the way we used to. And he didn't just set us free so that we wouldn't end up in prison again. And thank God that that is how it is and how it should be. But he set us free so that we would live in freedom. So that we would live in freedom. So that we would live life to the full, live life to the max. That's why Jesus says the thief, when he talked about the devil, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's the one who wants to imprison you. He's the one who wants to ensnare you. He's the one who wants to enslave you. He's the one that wants to hold you back from experiencing the reality and the freedom of life. But Jesus says, while that's what the thief comes to do, I'm come that you might have life and have life in its fullness. I want to set you free to live, he's saying. It was for freedom that Christ has set us free. Paul goes on to say in the second part of the verse, he says, stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again. We've got a second part of the verse there. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Stand firm then, he says. See, we've got our bit to do. It's not just about singing the songs, and we thank God we can talk about and sing about the freedom that he set us free from certain things, but we've got our bit to do now that he set us free. We have been set free. It's what he's done in us, it's what he's done for us. But now Paul says we need to stand firm. He has set us free, but we now need to stand firm. And we need to stand firm in the freedom that he's brought us into. Stand firm, he says, and do not let yourself again be burdened by a yoke of slavery. Stand firm. Who has to stand firm? The pastor? Yep. But not just the pastor, every person in this church. You have to stand firm. I have to stand firm. We have to stand firm. The church has to stand firm. We have our bit to do. Stand firm, then he said. What Paul is saying here is quite simply saying, don't go back there. Don't go back up the tree. Don't go back there. Don't go back to the pig pen. The prodigal left the pig pen. He went back to the father's house. He never went back to the pig pen. Don't go back there. Don't go back to the things that enslaved you, that ensnared you. Don't revisit those places that one time held you captive, either in mind or in reality. Don't go back there, he's saying. But move on. And don't let yourself be ensnared again by a yoke of slavery. Paul is saying, you've got your bit to do. He set you free. Now don't go back there. You've decided to follow Jesus. Follow him. Don't go back there. When Jesus set people free, he would often say to them, go and sin no more. See, he set them free from sin. He brought forgiveness to them. But now he says to them, go and sin no more. In other words, don't go back to the sin that got you here. Don't go back there. We often like to quote that part of the verse, what Jesus said to the woman who was caught in the act of adultery. And we often use what he said to her. And we say to people, let him who has no sin cast the first stone. And we say that because we know that no one is able to cast that first stone, because no one is without sin. We say that because we all acknowledge that none of us is perfect, that none of us is sinless. But sometimes we use that to justify the fact that we're not perfect, or just justify the fact that we're living wrong and doing wrong. Let him who has no sin cast the first stone. And we use that. But we often forget the bit where Jesus went on to say, go and sin no more. He didn't just say to those that thought that they were above this woman, to those who thought they were more righteous, if you think you're without sin, you cast the first stone, because he knew that none of them could do so. But he said to the woman, when he asked, where are those that accuse you? And she says, they're all gone. And he says, neither do I accuse you. And he forgave her for her sinful lifestyle. But he said to her, you go and you sin no more. Don't go back there. Don't go back to that lifestyle. Don't go back to the stuff that got you where you are today. Don't go back to the drug dealers. Don't go back to the controllers and manipulators. Don't go back to the pig pen. Don't go back there. Friends, we need to understand today that we've been set free, every single one of us. We have been set free. We've all got a story to tell. We've all got a testimony. If Christ has done something in your life and he brought you from where you were to where you are today, and you're now walking in a relationship with him, and we understand that it's not perfection from our part, but you're still walking in that relationship with Christ, you've got a story to tell. But you've got to keep adding to that story day after day. And you've got to understand and realize that you've been free, set free by Jesus Christ himself from that which ensnared you and enslaved you. And he's saying, don't go back there. Paul is saying, now you stand firm. Stand firm in your freedom, and do not allow yourself to be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Don't go back to the stuff that got you ensnared in the first place. You see, friends, the Christian life is about freedom. The Christian life is about freedom from sin. The Christian life is about freedom from judgment. The Christian life is about freedom from an eternal hell. The Christian life is about freedom from the devil and from the manipulations of the devil himself. The Christian life is about freedom from demonic forces. The Christian life is about freedom from negative influences and also from religion. The Christian life is about freedom from anything that ensnares us. And as each of us look back in our lives, we know that there were situations and circumstances where the devil had us. But Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came into our situation. And it was like Zacchaeus, he was walking by one day, and we were drawn to him. And we stopped for a moment to look, we stopped for a moment to watch, we stopped for a moment to listen. And at that moment in time, the Spirit of God spoke to us. At that moment in time, the Spirit of God came upon us, and we knew that that was the moment that we needed to give our lives and surrender our lives to Jesus. And while we have not walked in perfection from that day, yet we know that that was the day that he set us free. And that was the day that he came and took us by the hand and has led us forward in an amazing journey. And he set us free from anything that has sought to destroy us or to rule over us. Friends, I want to say this morning, I believe that it's time for us as Christians to let the world see the reality of Christian freedom. They don't just see us to and fro and to and fro and to and fro. Yeah, again, please don't pick this up wrong. Every one of us struggle with issues in life. None of us go through a week from one Sunday to the next Sunday as if it was just smooth sailing all the way. And none of us let each other down, and none of us let God down, because we do every single week. But I'm talking about those who, well, one day I'm a Christian and next day I'm not. One week I'm a Christian and next week I'm not. One week I'm following Jesus and next week, well, I don't really know about it. It's time that we as Christians began to show the world what Christian freedom really is. And to do so by getting to the point where we are living in freedom. It was for freedom that he set us free. But we need to live in that freedom where freedom reigns. But where freedom reigns not only in this place, but where freedom reigns in our lives. I love that song, Freedom Reigns in This Place. But for many Christians, that's it. Freedom reigns in this place. We got to show the world that it doesn't just reign in this place when we're singing the song, but the freedom reigns in our lives from one Sunday to the next, regardless of what we're going through as believers. Jesus said, you will know the truth. I'm going to finish in a few moments. Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. He was not saying that you will know truth by knowing or gaining more information or knowing more Bible verses. Some people think because we can post a Bible verse on Facebook that that's it. No, it's much, much more than that. Jesus is not saying that when you know more Bible verses, you will know more truth. It might certainly help. It's not what he's saying. You see, we know that the Word of God, in fact, Christ himself said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And if you want to know real freedom in your life, yes, you need to know and understand the Word of God, but you need to have such a relationship with Jesus that you know him as the way, you know him as the truth, and you know him as the life. And in knowing him as truth, you will walk in freedom because you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's why Jesus said, he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. It's through knowing Christ and walking in relationship with him that you will be truly set free. And friends, I want to tell you today that Jesus Christ is still in the business of setting people free. He's still in the business of setting people free, but the freedom that Jesus brings is not just the freedom for a moment, but it's the freedom of a lifetime. The freedom that Jesus brings is not just the freedom of a moment, but the freedom of a lifetime. If Andrew Willis was to say that, you'd be going and posting that on Facebook this afternoon. That's what Andrew Willis said. But I want you to get this, grasp this, the freedom. And Andrew, if you're watching us, we love you, brother. But the freedom that Jesus brings is not just for the moment. It's the freedom of a lifetime. And you will only truly know that freedom when you walk in it on a daily basis and you walk in a genuine relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Worship team, I'm going to ask you to come to the platform, please. I'm going to finish here in just a moment. Friends, I'm not satisfied with just being free to run and free to dance. We said several weeks ago, we asked the question, when was the last time someone waved the flag in this place, someone danced, someone, and I'm not saying that we should just do these things for the sake of doing it, but I'm talking about freedom. But I don't just want freedom to do that stuff. And when Roy Fields was here and the God is saying, I am free to run, I am free to dance, and it was all sorts of stuff, and it was just amazing. I don't just want to be free to sing. I am free to run and I am free to dance. While it's great to do those things, but I want to live in the freedom that Jesus Christ has bought for us. I want to live in that on a daily basis. See, we've already had communion this morning. We have been reminded of the price that Jesus paid in order to bring us forgiveness for sin. But with that forgiveness, he's brought us freedom. And the freedom that he's brought you has cost him an incredible, awesome, amazing price. He laid down his life so that we would be free. He lived down his life so that we would not only know what it is to enjoy being in each other's company and presence and having a good time of fellowship like this, but he paid that price so that we could live in freedom, as well as knowing that we're free from the sin that has held us back. Paid that price so that we could walk and live in that freedom. So the freedom that Jesus brings is a freedom to live. It was for freedom that Christ has set you free. Freedom to live without fear. Freedom to live without worry. Freedom to live without guilt. Freedom to live without boredom. Freedom to live without oppression. Freedom to live without the hindrances stopping us from advancing in the things of God. A freedom to live without the hurts and the hang-ups holding us back. But a freedom that says, because Christ has set us free, we're going to press on. We're going to take a stand. We're going to stand firm and not allow those things to hold us again, and not return to the stuff that He's freed us from. And I'm saying that this morning because I believe there's some of you right now as believers, you need to step into that freedom. You thank God that you're forgiven. You thank God that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. But I believe that some of you need to step into that freedom. Some of you are not yet Christians. You haven't even started your journey yet. And I'm encouraging you right now, as we did last week, get down off that tree, come out of that pig pen, begin to follow Jesus, and let Him walk you through life with the freedom that He's bought for you, the freedom that He's promised, the freedom that's yours if you're willing to take hold of it and step into it today.